I've always been a bit of a hypochondriac, but I never thought my worries would come to this. I remember the day I checked into the hospital, everything was fine. I had a cold, but nothing serious. I thought I would be in and out in a day or two, back to my normal life. But as the days went by, my health began to deteriorate. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They ran countless tests, but nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. I had always been an active person. I used to enjoy playing sports, going for runs and spending time with my friends and family. I was a hard worker and have a good job, but now I could barely move. I was in constant pain and I couldn't sleep. My family came to visit me every day, but they didn't recognize the person I had become. They were always so worried and scared. I couldn't stand to see the fear in their eyes. I wished I could tell them everything was going to be okay, but I knew that wasn't true. I remember asking the doctors what was wrong with me. They kept saying they were doing everything they can, but I could sense in their voice they had no idea what was happening. I was confused. I couldn't understand how my health could decline so rapidly. I asked them if it was something I did, something I ate, but there was no clear answer. It was on the 5th day of my hospital stay that I discovered the truth. I overheard a nurse talking about my case. I could tell from the tone of her voice that something was off. I had to know what was happening, so I asked her what was going on. She looked at me with a strange look and said, "It's probably better if you don't know." But I needed to know. I begged her to tell me. As the days passed by, I spent most of my time in my hospital room, trying to come to terms with what was happening to me. I was weak and frail, unable to even lift myself off the bed without assistance. I had no appetite and my days were filled with constant pain. I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. The doctors and nurses were always in and out of my room, running tests and trying different treatments, but nothing seemed to be working. They would talk in hushed tones, but I could tell they were worried and had no idea how to help me. The sense of hopelessness and despair was overwhelming. I would lie in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my life before this. I thought about my family, my friends, my job, and all the things I used to enjoy. I knew that if I didn't find a way to get better, I would lose everything. It was on the 10th day of my hospital stay that the nurse finally told me the truth. I overheard her talking with one of the doctors and I had to know what was going on. I begged her to tell me, and she finally relented. She told me that the hospital had been experimenting with a new treatment for viral infections, and I had been chosen as one of the test subjects. They had no idea what the long-term effects of the treatment would be, but they were willing to risk my life to find out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been used as a guinea pig without my knowledge or consent. I felt violated and betrayed. I couldn't understand how a hospital, a place where people go to get better, could do something like this. I was filled with anger and the need for revenge, but at the same time, I was so weak and ill that all I could do was to lay there and take it in. I felt trapped, like there was no way out. The reality of my situation was starting to set in, and I knew that my life would never be the same. It was clear to me that I had to get out of the hospital as soon as possible. I knew that I could never go back there, and I couldn't trust the medical profession ever again. But I also knew that I had to share my story with others, so that no one else would have to go through what I did. I spent the next few days carefully planning my escape. I knew it wouldn't be easy, as I was in no condition to move around easily. The nurses and doctors were keeping a close watch on me, but I was determined. I waited for the right moment, and when the coast was clear, I made my move. I gathered all my strength and started to crawl through the hospital's corridor with my last energy. I was crawling and still could not see the end of the corridor, but I had to keep going. I was in pain and I felt lightheaded, but I knew that I had to keep moving. Finally, I reached the front door of the hospital. I was surprised to find that it was unlocked. I stumbled out into the cold night air, feeling both relieved and terrified at what I had just discovered. I knew that I had to get as far away from that place as possible. I started to walk, with no idea where I was going. I felt a sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. The reality of what had just happened was starting to set in, and I knew that my life would never be the same. I felt, as I walked into the night, that something was following me, something terrifying and dark, something that would never let me go. As the days passed, I started to piece my life back together. I went to the police and reported what had happened to me in the hospital. I told my story to the media and it caused a great public outrage. Later on I took legal actions against the hospital and those who were responsible. I spent months recovering, both physically and mentally, but I knew that the scars of what happened would stay with me forever. Growing up, I was a sickly child. I had asthma, allergies, and a host of other minor health issues. My parents were always taking me to the doctor, and I spent more time in hospitals than I cared to admit. But as I grew older, my health improved, and I thought I had left my hypochondria behind. That was until I hit my 30s. Suddenly, I was plagued with all sorts of aches and pains. I was convinced that I had some rare disease or another. I spent hours researching my symptoms online, and I always seemed to find something that matched. My friends and family thought I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So, when I woke up one morning feeling under the weather, I didn't hesitate to call my primary care physician. She listened patiently to my list of symptoms and then advised me to go to the emergency room, just to be safe. I didn't want to, but I trusted her. I arrived at the hospital and was quickly admitted to a room. The nurses and doctors were all friendly and professional. They ran some tests, took some samples, and hooked me up to an IV. Everything seemed normal. But then, things started to get strange. I started to notice that there were no other patients on my floor. I asked the nurses where everyone was, but they always avoided the question. They would say things like, "Don't worry, you're in good hands." Or, "You're the only patient we need to focus on right now." It was odd, but I didn't think much of it. But the weirdness didn't stop there. I started to hear strange noises coming from the walls. I would hear whispers, moans, and even screams. But when I asked the nurses about it, they would tell me it was just the pipes or the wind. I didn't believe them. I asked to see my primary care physician, but she was never available. I asked to speak with the hospital administrator, but they were unavailable as well. I was starting to feel like something was wrong, very wrong. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone crying. It was a soft, mournful sound that seemed to be coming from the other side of the wall. I got out of bed and walked over to the wall, pressing my ear against it. The crying grew louder. It was a child, a little girl. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was a child doing in this hospital? I decided to investigate. I walked out of my room and into the hallway. The lights were dim, but I could make out the shapes of the doors. I tried to open them, but they were locked. I continued down the hallway, and as I turned a corner, I saw a figure, a ghostly figure, standing at the end of the hallway. It was a woman, and she was holding a baby. She was staring at me with a blank, emotionless expression. I was frozen in fear. I couldn't move. And then, she vanished. I knew then that something was deeply wrong with this place. Why would ghostly figures appearing in a hospital? What has happened here? I started to run, but it was as if the hospital was working against me. The doors were locked, and the walls seemed to be closing in. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. As I was running, I saw a light in the distance. I thought it might be an exit, and I ran towards it. But as I got closer, I realized that it was something else. It was a room, and inside, there were rows and rows of beds. Each bed had a person lying in it, hooked up to tubes and wires. And they were all alive, barely. I was horrified. What I saw was a human experiment room. And I was the next subject of this experiments. I knew then that I was in grave danger. This hospital was not a hospital, it was a prison, a laboratory where they conducting experiments on human lives. I had to escape, at any cost. I turned and ran, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they caught me. I had to find a way out, and fast. I searched frantically for an exit, but every door was locked. I started to feel like I was going to be trapped there forever. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I found a window. It was small, and it was high up on the wall, but it was my only chance. I climbed up onto a nearby cabinet and smashed the window with my elbow. I squeezed through the opening and fell to the ground outside. I lay there for a moment, gasping for air. I was free, but I knew I could never forget what happened in that hospital. I had to find out the truth about what was happening there, and I had to do it before it was too late.